Still stuck playing the same scale you've ever learned, right? Learning how to solo and improvise lead guitar can be an exciting but also overwhelming process. We stuff our brains with all this information like learning scales and scale patterns, but when it comes time to actually use them and even weave between them in a way that's like musical, we just fall short. It's because most of us get caught in this trap where we're stuck playing in boxes. So we think about all these scales and scale patterns that we learn, and we just stay confined within them whenever we're trying to solo or improvise. Well, today I'm gonna show you how to break out of the box and be able to confidently stroll the fretboard in both major and minor. All right, now let's get down to it. So let's say we're operating in the key of E. We're gonna explore both the major and minor tonalities using the pentatonic scale and see how we can actually seamlessly transition between them so we're no longer stuck in one specific box. So let's start with E minor. So we're gonna take a look at the E minor pentatonic scale. We're gonna look at 3 boxes of the E minor pentatonic scale, and we're gonna talk about how we can actually seamlessly weave between them. So we're gonna start with the G pattern E minor pentatonic scale that we all know and love. Now, if you don't already know, I'm referencing this as the G pattern because the actual shape, the physical makeup of the scale pattern resembles a G chord in the open position. This is using the cage system, right? This isn't something you need to know. This is just to clear the air on why I'm calling this the G pattern. It's because when we're in reference of the cage system, it represents the G chord form or chord shape. So we're still in E minor with this scale. We're not in G, we're in E minor. We're calling it the G pattern because it literally resembles the G chord shape. So that's the only reason, the only parallel, so just don't get it confused. Now we're gonna take a look at 2 adjacent boxes right next to the kind of bookending the G pattern. Starting with this, the A pattern, it looks like this. This pattern is particularly cool because right here on the 12th fret, this is like a shared wall between the A pattern and the G pattern, just like right across. I've heard John Mayer call it the pentatonic equator. So it's this cool little spot, you know, when you're operating between a G and an A pattern pentatonic scale, and you have this little equator here that just connects them together. So it's just really handy that they're all connected just on that one fret. Okay, next we're gonna move up right here to the E pattern, and it looks like this. So these are 3 of 5 pentatonic scale patterns in total that actually make up the word caged, right? 5 letters, C-A-G-E-D, for the 5 positions. So what we're looking at here is we got A, G, E, which is in the order of the word cage. We're spelling out age. We're showing our age here with these pentatonic patterns, right? But it's all in the same order. So even if you don't understand the cage system, don't worry about it. This is all just kind of bonus stuff. You don't need to know the cage system in order to understand what I'm about to show you, but just to explain why I'm referencing these scale patterns with those particular names. Okay, so we have these 3 boxes. Now, how do we actually break out of just playing in one box at a time? So if we're sitting here soloing in, let's say, the A pattern, now, that's cool. What's really great about these different patterns is even though we're dealing with the same scale, right? These are all the E minor pentatonic scale, which is only 5 notes, right? Just 5 notes occurring over and over again in different positions and different octaves. But just by the way that these patterns are laid out gives us a unique way to approach licks. So one thing I love about the A pattern particularly is I can do stuff like this, you know? So it's a little bit different than when I'm playing in the G pattern. Because in the G pattern, we gravitate toward these common pentatonic tropes, you know, like. Which is not a bad thing. I mean, that stuff's super fun to play and it's really rewarding, but you know, if it's all we're playing when we're dealing with the pentatonic scale, like if you're like how I was for years, like just being stuck where the G pattern was my go-to, even though I had all these other patterns, I would just spend almost 100% of my time in this pattern, and it would just get worn out over time, and I'd think, you know, I couldn't really play the pentatonic scale in a way that excited me anymore. But when I was messing around with these other patterns, I was starting to find sort of ways to just navigate the scale that's just very different just by the way that these patterns are laid out. So taking a look at the E pattern, for example, we got You know, we still hear the minor pentatonic tonality there, but there's like, it just puts me in a different zone where I'm no longer stuck playing those pentatonic tropes I was just talking about. And another reason it's important to explore these different pentatonic patterns is to learn how to find the same licks regardless of what pattern you're in. That's truly the hallmark of someone who really understands the fretboard. So if I wanted to play just a real simple pentatonic lick that I only knew in the G pattern, let's say like this. That was the lick, right? But if you told me, hey, play that same lick in the A pattern, I'd be like, I don't know how, right? So it's a great exercise to like find simple licks and just find like those same notes and just learn to navigate them in that unique way based on the pattern. So if this is the lick, let's try and find it here. There we go, completely different feel. Now let's try and find it in the E pattern. It's gonna be a little interesting. It gets a little cramped up here, right? But again, this is like a good exercise to be able to be comfortable enough navigating the fretboard that regardless of what position you're in, you can play the lick that you intend to play. So let's see. There, that's the lick. Voila. Okay, so we've established our playground with these three pentatonic patterns, but now how do we seamlessly weave between them in a way that breaks out of the box? Well, to do that, we're actually gonna take a simple fragment of the pentatonic scale and we're gonna span it across 3 octaves that actually covers all that ground that those 3 boxes are in. It's gonna use something I like to call the 3-for-1 octave system, where we're gonna take the same little mini box, we can call it, right? But we're gonna span it across 3 octaves in total that cover a lot more of the fretboard than just a vertical linear scale pattern. And this is it right here. It starts on the 10th fret of the low E string. That's that first little box, and then we're gonna play the next octave, the middle octave of it. And then finally, the high octave. So you hear how it's the same notes, just in 3 octaves. We got the low one, the middle one, and the high one. And you may notice that these 3 little mini boxes across those 3 octaves cover all of that ground that we just went over with those 3 pentatonic scale patterns. So you can think of this as like a shortcut that'll let you easily weave through all 3 patterns. You know, you can go. Another thing that's great about this pattern is that it's just so inviting to just slide through it, you know? It gives way to a lot more musicality when you're navigating through the exact same scale that we just went over with those 3 patterns. But like I said, when you kind of ditch the linear box pattern and then just weave your way through it like that, it makes it a lot simpler. It's literally like a shortcut. But that doesn't mean that you want to neglect the remaining pieces of each pattern, right? I still highly recommend you try out that exercise of like finding the same lick as simple. It can be as simple as can be, just like 2 notes, like, you know, and then just like finding something super simple and then just finding those same notes and then just, you know, over time just gradually adding more notes into the mix and then doing like full-blown killer guitar licks and trying to find it in each of those patterns. Like I said, that'll really help build your confidence and knowledge of the fretboard overall. Oh, and by the way, if you're getting value out of this lesson, do me a favor, hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It means a lot and it gets you to the front row of all of our new lessons here on YouTube. So thanks in advance and let's get back to it. Now that we have all this at our fingertips, before you go out and start using it in the wild or playing it over backing tracks, which believe me, I want you to do and you're gonna do. But for right now, I invite you to just live here for a while, just solo, no backing, nothing. Just like start in one pattern and then use that 3-for-1 octave system to make your way into the next one. Just like let it flow, freeform it, no pressure. the beginning, don't worry about being flashy, just feel your way through it, and you could do things like slides and bends and vibrato just to give it some, intrigue. All right, so we've covered this concept using the E minor pentatonic scale, but now let's talk about major. We're basically going to be doing the exact same thing, just conveyor belted down to a different position on the fretboard to cover the E major pentatonic. Starting with the G pattern, which is kind of our little nucleus, our little center stage here. So if we were playing starting on the 12th fret for the E minor G pattern, in order to play E major, we just go down 3 frets, 1, 2, 3, and we fill out that same exact pattern like this. So even though we play this exact same pattern, we get a completely different tonality, a major tonality as opposed to a minor. And a lot of it has to do with where the root notes are within the pattern. So over here with the G pattern, the root notes of E were here. And then when you go between those 3 root notes using the E minor pentatonic scale pattern, whereas here in major, sounds completely different even though we played the exact same pattern with our fingers. So as a little pro tip to help you feel your way through these pentatonic patterns, especially getting used to the major and minor tonality and kind of the dichotomy of the two, just focus on where the root notes are and how they relate to the rest of the notes in the scale. Okay, so we have our G pattern for E major pentatonic. Let's find our A pattern right here. And the root notes are here. It's got 2 of them in there. And here is the E pattern. This one's got 3 root notes in it, which actually overlaps beautifully over the G pattern E minor pentatonic scale. So if you're ever looking at, going between major and minor, let's say over a blues, because there's a lot of room to do that. You can play in minor pentatonic and throw in a little bit of major, and it gives it a really nice, it's a nice tension, You can, if you're just wailing in E minor pentatonic, let's say, playing all those tropes, right? You could very easily slide into the E pattern of the E major pentatonic scale. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's get into the 3-for-1 octave pattern for the E major pentatonic. We have, starting on the 7th fret of the low E string right here. So you may notice these are all the same actual finger patterns that we just went over with the E minor pentatonic, but we've just conveyor belted it down. It's like we took that whole little layout and we just shifted it down a distance of 3 frets, pretty much, right? And if we were to isolate, let's say the 3-for-1, and then went into the minor version of it, it's the same exact, way of playing it with our fingers. So when you're navigating through them, like I said, just focus on where those root notes are. So if you're in the minor tonality, you get used to kind of how it sounds based on going between the root notes and then hearing the tension of the other notes in the scale and how they relate to the root note. And it really paints that minor pentatonic picture. And you do the exact same thing when you shift it over to the major tonality, and then it paints the major pentatonic picture. Wow, how's that for alliteration? Painting a pentatonic picture. Well, hey, it works. Now again, before you go off trying this stuff out in the wild, I want you to just live in it for a bit, just by yourself. Just flow through these scales, get really used to them. Think about what I said about the root notes, and then just try and come up with some cool stuff. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or flashy, right? What this is gonna do is it's gonna build that confidence and build that familiarity so that when you're actually on the spot trying to solo or improvise, even if it's over a backing track by yourself at home, you're gonna have more immediate ideas just flowing through because you've already kind of navigated that ground. And you could think of it like you've charted the map of the fretboard and you already kind of know where you're going. And especially if you take it even further and try out playing the same kind of licks in those different positions, that'll just make you that much more comfortable. I mean, you'll pretty much be Christopher Columbus of the pentatonic scale. So now you have the tools that'll help break you out of that boxed way of thinking when it comes to playing through scales. The red carpet has been laid out for you to actually use these scales in a musical way and seamlessly weave between them using that 3-for-1 octave pattern. And this works equally well for both major and minor tonalities. Just remember what I said about living in it for a while by yourself. I mean, take like 5 to 10 minutes a day of nothing but just going through minor and major pentatonic, through those 3 patterns that we just covered, slide through them with that 3-for-1 octave pattern, but just use your ear to just like find some ideas and then just get really familiar and comfortable with it. And you've heard me say, if you want to move between the minor and major tonalities with those pentatonic patterns, you essentially have to conveyor belt that whole layout just down a few frets. Well, that's in reference of a game-changing, extremely powerful system and way of understanding the fretboard, regardless of what key you're in and what scale you're playing. It happens to be a very successful system that I have personally developed, and I want to share it with you right now. And it's called the Fretboard Conveyor Belt. This system will show you a way of understanding the fretboard that I have never seen done before. And I am gifting this to you 100% free. Just be sure to click right here to claim your copy or check that link in the description box. You may not know it yet, but everything that we have covered today works in any key, not just the key of E. So as of right now, your arsenal is pretty much packed, and you are well equipped to handle almost any musical style.